Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us this evening. And also want to make sure to welcome our guests that are joining us as members of our audience here, but also joining us virtually on our live stream Zoom platform. So thank you all. My name is Greg Hull. I'm the Dean here at the Herron School of Art and Design at IU Indianapolis. And I'm very pleased you could join us this evening for the 4th annual Michael A. and Laurie Burns McRobbie Emerging Artist Lecture Series. This annual event supports national and international emerging artists from diverse backgrounds through a variety of public lectures, residencies, and/or exhibitions at the school. And the goal of the program is to provide a platform for recipients to share innovative ideas and art practices while advancing learning experiences across the campus and community. And before we begin this evening's event, I want to take a moment to thank our many patrons and friends of Herron. I want to thank Herron's hospitality sponsor, Aloft Indianapolis Downtown, for providing our visiting artists with complimentary lodging. I'd also like to share the complimentary parking is made possible this evening by the Great Frame Up of Indianapolis and Carmel. If you're parked in the parking garage, we can provide parking vouchers for you. Our gallery assistants in the galleries will help provide them. So, and now, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Herron's Gallery Director and Curator, M. Pofall. Welcome, M.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. First off, also shout out to our missing but present in spirit, the person that curated Juan's show, Elias Garza. Many of you know and love him. He is stuck on a plane right now because of the government shutdown. So hopefully he'll show up at some point. Yeah, boo. But he is missed. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Miami, Potawatomi, Shawnee, Lenape, and other Native peoples of the past and present. Founded in 1969, this campus sits on land that was once home to Indigenous communities and later a thriving Black neighborhood. We honor those who have cared for this land and hope that our work here in the pursuit and sharing of knowledge moves us towards a future rooted in justice and equity. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Juan Arango Palacios. Juan's exhibition, Tierra, Caliente, channels his experience as a queer Colombian immigrant into a vibrant visual language of belonging, resistance, and cultural memory. Through painting, drawing, weaving, and ceramics, among many other things, I'm sure, he explores how the body, through gesture, fashion, and myth, expresses the complexity of queer and diasporic life. Referencing everything from Latin American figurative traditions to cumbia music and magical realism, Juan's work transforms personal stories into powerful communal narratives. Juan holds a BFA from SAIC. We all know what that is. And is currently pursuing an MFA from the University of Chicago. He's exhibited widely, including solo shows at New Image Art in Los Angeles, Tala Gallery in Chicago, Spinello Projects in Miami, and GA, is that how you pronounce it? GA, Gallery in New York. Please join me in welcoming Juan Arango Palacios.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor to be speaking at this university. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I always like to start my presentations with this painting by Fernando Botero. I think this painting perfectly encapsulates the context in which I was born. This is a painting of the death of Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar being the notorious drug lord that died in 1993. And Fernando painted this painting in 1999. I grew up with Fernando Botero prints in my house. And I was captivated by the way that he always gigantized the figures. Here, Pablo Escobar is depicted as this bigger-than-life figure being shot at by the police on the rooftops of Medellin. creating this sort of mythical image of actual history. And it is a huge influence of how I make my paintings now. This history of violence in Colombia, however, is what pushed my parents to move from Colombia to the United States. And in 2007, I moved to the United States and started experiencing American culture. I put Grant Wood's American Gothic here because I think he's a perfect encapsulation of regionalism. When I moved to the United States, I experienced regionalism. I first moved to Louisiana, and after living there for a few years, my family moved to Texas. Grant Wood's American Gothic and his whole practice is a portrait of rural America in his home state of Iowa, and has greatly inspired me to paint culture the way that I experience it as an immigrant, but as a new American in this country as well. Both of those paintings were greatly influential in my making of Union. This is a painting that I made this year at an artist residency in Los Angeles. And I made this painting in the backdrop of the political crisis that we're living through right now. I want to speak about culture, I want to speak about identity, and I want to speak about politics through my work. And I do so by representing the figure and following the conversations that have been art historically relevant throughout time. As you can see, it's an image of a couple standing in front of an urban city block, highlighting the importance of community and mutual aid during these times of crisis. And then also normalizing queer love in our society, especially while it's under attack by authoritarian governments. While it has this sort of optimistic outlook, there is a little bit of pessimistic foreshadowing. If you take a look at the figure's fingers, there's these tan lines where perhaps wedding rings used to be, foreshadowing the potential looming loss of our right to get married. It's just a reality that we live in, hopefully not a reality that happens, but sadly it is something that is at stake. So using these great artists that came before me, I am speaking on the political issues that are affecting me as a person and as an artist in today's political climate. I arrived at this kind of art making through a long process of research and education. And I'm going to take you through my journey as a student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, how I started as an undergraduate, and how I have arrived at where I am today. This triptych here is the first piece that I ever made in undergraduate school, freshman year. I didn't make this in a painting class, I made this in a research class. And I made this fully leaning into my preconceived notions of what painting was, my understanding of Catholic painting, my understanding of religious imagery, and trying to really use the act of appropriation to my benefit. I was interested in exploring my own identity. My parents growing up always told me that I was mestizo and that I had to honor both my indigenous roots and also my Spanish roots. And while I knew plenty about my Spanish roots because it's what I grew up learning about, I didn't know much about the Quimbaya people, which were the people that inhabited the city that I'm from before colonization. So I started a momentous research project on the Quimbaya people, and I ended up with this project, which is depicting the three major gods of Quimbaya religion. The middle figure being this creator goddess, and her two twin sons, who are the god of good and the god of evil. This project is entirely about appropriation. I am appropriating this sort of virgin icon that you see in religious imagery, typically veiled, but here naked. In Catholic paintings, she's usually standing on a crescent moon, and I put her on this full moon with a snake wrapped around her feet, which is also how the Catholic Virgin is usually depicted. However, in Catholicism, Snakes are seen as evil. They represent the underworld, they represent sin and the devil himself. But indigenous cultures, snakes are actually a representation of life. They are a symbol that do represent the underworld, but as an act of remembering our ancestors and not inciting fear through talk about sin and evil or bad. I also appropriated the form of the paintings. These 3 paintings with the larger one in the middle is a very traditional Catholic composition that I used to sort of reclaim this aspect of my identity that I didn't get to learn when I was a child. Well, this was a great research project. What it lacked was an exploration of painting itself. I felt like I was learning what I wanted to paint, but I wasn't learning how to paint. And so I challenged myself to make paintings that made me really uncomfortable. I wanted to really experiment with pushing paint around the canvas. And at the time, I was taking a painting class with my teacher, and I told her that I wanted to try to abstract the image of a Catholic saint. And she was like, oh, well, how many Catholic saints are there? And I said, I don't know, hundreds. And she was like, then you should be making hundreds of paintings. I didn't make hundreds of paintings, of course. I made about 20. But through this repetitive act of making myself uncomfortable through painting, through trying new things that I wasn't familiar with, I was able to rediscover myself as a painter and be more comfortable making more confident moves on the surface of the canvas. This sort of liberation from my preconceived notions of painting arrived me at my Jungle series, which is a series that I made during the last 2 years of my undergraduate career at the School of the Art Institute. I arrived at the jungle as an archetype because of a childhood memory. When I was a student in Catholic school in Colombia, my school used to be far removed from the city, surrounded by jungles and forests. And I had a classmate who would come with me to the sort of jungle forest area. And that's where we first revealed to each other that we were queer. It's the first time we kissed another boy. And this jungle became a sanctuary. So I wanted to solidify that sanctuary as an archetype in my work. And I repeatedly painted these abstract expressionist paintings of jungle spaces as I was practicing painting. However, it felt like something was missing. My school, the whole program at the School of the Art Institute was really focused on what they called muscle painting. These big, gigantic, abstract paintings where people were painting with brooms, pushing large quantities of paint around on the canvas. And while it was really satisfying and rewarding to paint that way, I felt as if something in my work was missing. I didn't feel like it could quite communicate everything that I wanted to talk about. And I realized that what was missing from my work was the figure. I realized that when I made this painting, Cowboy in Distress, my archetype of the jungle became a backdrop for other archetypes. The cowboy itself is an archetype, and so is the horse. Traditionally speaking, a man on a horse in art history is seen as this symbol of authority and power, but I wanted to disrupt that a little bit and create this chaotic scene of a cowboy falling off of a bucking horse, being rescued by this angelic figure. So I realized that through the inclusion of the figure, I was able to talk about things that really mattered to me. Things like identity, gender, sexuality, power, and the patriarchy. And that I could talk about these things truly through my own experience by depicting the human body, which is something that I feel like I would have never been able to do through abstraction alone. And after school is when I really started to develop my work as a body of work, and I got the opportunity to have several solo shows, each having their own concept. So I'm gonna take you through a journey of a few of my solo shows that I've had as an artist since then, just to give you an idea of how I come up with ideas and conceptualize them into an exhibition space. This here is Payasadas, my 2021 exhibition at Epiphany Center for the Arts in Chicago. Epiphany Center for the Arts is it used to be a cathedral that was abandoned and then it was purchased by developers who turned it into a center for the arts, a public art center. And they invited me to do this show. And at the time I was exploring archetypes still, and I was really interested in this archetype of the clown. The clown as this archetype to not to be taken seriously, an archetype of this figure that is sort of outcast from society and is ridiculed, but at the same time so relatable when they're in front of us. I feel like there was a lot of parallels between clown theory and queerness. And so I decided to explore the clown in this show. Payasadas means clownery in Spanish. So I explored these images of Catholic saints, turning them into clowns, ridiculing them, taking them less seriously, and taking away the fear that came with all of these images of Catholic saints that I saw growing up. Over here we have Saint Sebastian, who is typically depicted hanging, being penetrated by a bunch of arrows, but this one has these goofy flowers flopping all over his body. And then Saint Michael, usually depicted slaying the beast, depicted as this sort of valiant clown fighting a snake in the jungle. As you might notice, these are not paintings, but they're textiles. This is something that came about because I had a problem as a young artist. I made these textile pieces during a residency in New York City, knowing that I had this solo show coming up. Having no funding, I didn't know how to make a show in New York City that I could then transport to Chicago without being able to pay for it. Textiles was a great solution to this problem because I was able to make really large-scale work to fit into this large exhibition space, fold it up into my suitcase, bring it to Chicago, give it a quick iron, and hang it in the gallery. So this is kind of the first time that I started really thinking practically as an artist and learning how to work within my own means. You don't always have a shipping budget. You don't always have even a production budget for exhibitions. But as an artist, you can't pass up the opportunity to show your work. And so I was thinking on my feet, trying to really see how I can make the most out of the work that I had with the materials that I had available to me. And it was important to me to really respond to the space that the work was being installed in. This was the chapel of sort of this like side chapel in the cathedral space. And so of course I had to paint saints, or I had to make work about saints, responding to the colors of the stained glass windows, making sure that I honored what the space was before, honored what it is now, and spoke about my own experience growing up Catholic. The space really informed how my exhibition came about. However, sometimes you're not given a beautiful cathedral space to put your work in. Sometimes you're just given a blank wall, which is truly an opportunity to do whatever you want. I mean, really come up with an idea that's important to you to create an entire exhibition about. This exhibition, Amor de mis Amores, is inspired by Latin American music in 2022 at Jude Gallery in Chicago. This exhibition came about because I was extremely inspired by these supernatural lyrics present in a lot of cumbia, vallenato, and reggaeton songs. This really vivid imagery that I grew up just casually hearing in my work, or in these songs, that I really wanted to include in my images as an artist. This exhibition also presented a problem though, a practical problem for me as an artist. I was only given about 3 months to create this exhibition, and I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to exhibit my work. I knew that in the 3 months that I had, I could not create enough paintings to fill up the entire exhibition space. It was a small space, but it had these winding walls that had a lot of wall space, and I just knew I could not fill it all up. And so I relied on my old friend drawing. Through drawing, I can make really big, colorful works that are just as evocative as my paintings, but take a fraction of the time to make. Once again, thinking practically and thinking on my feet, I decided to make a series of drawings, some small, some really big. But then I was faced with yet another problem. How was I going to present these drawings? I don't have the money to frame a bunch of small or frankly like really large drawings. And I didn't want to just pin them to the wall or put magnets on them. So I started looking at the images that I had made and making these sort of grommet attachments out of ceramic to attach the small ones to the wall. And for the larger works, I decided to add a layer of narrative to the drawings through the hanging mechanism itself. These are they're pastel, soft pastel drawings on paper. They have grommets on each corner on the top, and I put these arrows through them, making it seem as if Cupid himself had shot these arrows through the drawings, or as if these drawings themselves, the piece of paper, was Saint Sebastian being punished for his sins, like I saw so many times growing up in churches. So there's multiple layers of narrative that I added to these drawings just through the hanging mechanism itself. This kind of mechanism informed some later work that I made, like this work, Al Vapor, which is this depiction of like a bathhouse scene where I made the large drawing and I was faced with the problem of presenting it. Again, I didn't want to pay thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars to get it framed. And so I put grommets through the top of the paper and I hung it on this bath towel. That way, the drawing itself becomes a closed curtain, and at the same time, an invitation for the viewer to come in and join the intimate scene that is being depicted. And this really taught me to, once again, just work within the resources that I have available, rather than scratch my head at how I can come up with funds to present things in the way that they traditionally are presented. My 2023 show Cortavenas at Rushine Co Gallery in Los Angeles was a continuation of my interest in lyrics, and this is really when I started exploring magical realism as an influence in my work. I'm extremely influenced by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa, Isabel Allende, a lot of magical realism authors who champion the genre. And I wanted to see how I could take literary strategies and translate them into painting. So I started making paintings that seemingly are of just everyday life. I started asking a question of, what would my life have been like if I had never left Colombia? A lot of these what ifs, and I started embedding these questions and these narratives into my piece. The seemingly normal narrative of two men passing each other in a wooded trail. I sort of embedded these symbols to add meaning to the image. Over here you have this snake tattoo being mirrored by a snake on the bamboo plant, which just adds an element of rhythm to the work. I have these glowing yellow butterflies, which have become a symbol in Colombia due to Gabriel Garcia Marquez's literature. In one of his books, 100 Years of Solitude, one of the characters passes away, and his lover is constantly followed by these yellow butterflies representing his presence in spirit. And that aspect of his book was so influential that it has become a national cultural symbol. Next year during the World Cup, you'll see that the Colombian national jerseys are going to have these yellow butterflies on them, coming from his book. So I decided to put them in my painting as an homage to my cultural roots. And then finally, I also wanted to include secondary characters, these characters in the books that kind of pop in at random times during the narrative. This flower, sort of like looking back at you, at the viewer, is a tradition that is present in a lot of Catholic and Renaissance painting, where there's one character in the painting not engaged in the action going on in the painting, but looking at you, the viewer. So this is my witness to this scene going on. And then just an innocent bystander, this fly. So these tender moments are what add layers of narrative and just visual language to the images that I am creating. Similarly, I did it in this painting, Pobre Diablos, which means poor devils. It is inspired by a reggaeton song. And it's kind of speaking to my experience growing up as a queer child, being told that being gay is a sin, that we're gonna go to hell, that it's not socially acceptable. And so I depicted two devils blissfully and playfully interacting with each other while having these angelic figures tattooed on them, just as Catholicism is projected onto our identities and our bodies growing up in these religious contexts. And then lastly, I will talk about Alta Montaña. Alta Montaña is my solo exhibition that I had in New York City last year at Gallery. And this exhibition really highlighted my interest in textiles. I learned how to weave at the School of the Art Institute with my great mentor, John Paul Morabito. And I learned how to weave on a floor loom, creating weavings kind of like this one. This is a hand-woven tapestry. It is made using a method called inlay, where every single line that is woven is you insert color to create this image. It is a pretty painstaking process. It takes a very long time, but it was really important for me to learn this process. At the time, during college, I was part of a few decolonial efforts in school. I was president of the Latino Student Association, and I was also president of the Decolonization Dinner Planning Committee, which the Decolonization Dinner was a gigantic banquet that we had in school around the time of Thanksgiving, where we would invite guest speakers to talk about topics regarding decolonization, and every affinity group would cater food from their culture to provide guests. And I started asking myself, if I'm so interested in decolonization, why am I painting? Painting is such a historically Eurocentric medium, and so I challenged myself to learn something new, and I found what I was looking for in weaving, because weaving truly is a universal medium. Weaving is something that has happened in every culture across time and space on Earth, and I found a great deal of comfort in weaving, specifically weaving images into this sort of constructed structure rather than an applied, like applying paint to a canvas. The only constraint with weaving, however, is that weaving takes a really long time. And as a working artist, when you have to come up with shows, when people are asking you to make things, you can't spend 3 months making something like this, which is about how long this took me to make. And so I had to, once again, rely on my practical skills to come up with a different way of approaching this medium to create the work that I wanted. And so in the world of textiles, we have what we call the Walmart blanket weaving. And it's called Walmart blanket because you used to be able to go to Walmart and bring a photo, and they would send it off to get woven, a photo of your family, your dog, whatever. They would send it off and it would get woven and you would receive a photo blanket that you could put on you could throw on your couch. And so I saw this as an opportunity to expand the bounds of my practice. I could get images woven that would only take a couple of weeks to return to my studio, and I could sew them together and make super large scale work that would truly push my understanding of scale. And a lot of non-weavers and people say, oh, well, isn't this cheating? And I say, yes, it is, but it's a good kind of cheating. Back in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, when people were making gigantic tapestries that are now hanging in the Vatican or in museums in Europe, those tapestries were woven over the course of years by a workshop of 30 weavers. And I don't have years or 30 weavers to help me, but I do have digital weaving. And I think it's important for us as artists to consider every resource that is available to us in order to really push the reaches of our practice. This was a great opportunity for me to work with scale, and it inspired me to make even larger work. This is a piece that I later exhibited at Spinello Projects in Miami. It is a very large-scale weaving. I live in a Mexican neighborhood in Chicago, and down the street from me, there is a shop where they sell appliques and embellishments for quinceañera dresses, like in bulk. And so I bought a bunch of those embellishments and appliques and decorated my weavings with it. I like to take what I receive from the weaving mill and alter it in some kind of way by dyeing it, stitching onto it, embroidering, just to add my artist's touch to it. And in this way, I can work within the timeline that I need to work within and create something truly large that I would have never been able to achieve just through hand weaving on my own. And then the last thing I talk about is the exhibition that you guys will get to see today, Tierra, Caliente. Tierra Caliente for me is really a great opportunity for me to reorient my practice and think about the new mythologies that I want to create in my work during these times of political crisis. It's hard to even, I mean, it's hard to be a person. It's hard to get in the studio and make stuff. There's so much stuff going in the world. Why does a painting in my studio matter? And so I'm really trying to ask myself what it is that my work is doing and how I can evolve my work. I am exploring new mythologies by going back to my roots. This painting is inspired by biblical themes, biblical stories, and then also personal experiences. It's talking about love, it's talking about jealousy and envy, it's talking about creation. And so I'm really approaching my work with this critical lens, going back to my roots of using monochromatic color palettes, but also complicating it some more and trying to really alter my understanding of image building in painting. I am heavily influenced by this book, Chromophobia. Chromophobia is a great color theory book by David Batchelor, and it has sort of been the key to my liberation as a painter. It outlines how Western culture has this inherent fear of color, how colonialism and even more modern movements like minimalism have sort of made us feel like color is less than or other. And the book really encourages us to think differently about color and to find power in color. And so through these new paintings that I made, I wanted to really challenge my understanding on color. And instead of working just monochromatically, I challenged myself to make a painting that was made of two fully contrasting colors and seeing if I could make a harmonious image that worked on its own. In the Wishing Well is also a reference to queer culture. It is another bathhouse scene. I tend to take inspiration from these places because I'm really interested in the way that sexuality has been repressed into these very specific spaces, and how a lot of gay men specifically have resorted to acts like cruising and this sort of like concealed sexuality to express themselves sexually among each other, but never in the public eye. And once again, going back to my roots, drawing is a huge part of my practice. And I do think that it's the most fundamental aspect of art making. I always go back to drawing. I think it is such an immediate form that allows me to get ideas out of my head quickly so that I can move on to the next thing. I see these as color experiments, light experiments, and really trying to challenge my understanding of the surface versus the content of the work. Santo trying to depict this generic queer saint in the backdrop of the Colombian mountains, using this spiral as sort of like a light source, and challenging my understanding of monochrome, with the spiral being this monochromatic red and pink, and everything else being rendered in full color. Similarly, this piece, Heliconias, is tied to the bamboo garden piece that I showed you earlier. However, I wanted to reference this sparkle shape that I often include in my work. I see the sparkle as this sort of queer symbol. The sparkle emoji is probably the most used emoji on my phone. And I wanted to represent that only through color and light by creating this sort of like diagonal composition in one of these everyday scenes. Once again, asking myself the question of, what would my life have been like if I had never left my home? And then on challenging myself, I also want to explore new materials. This piece here is a very small, I call it a sketch, a ceramic sketch. I want to bring my work outside of just a two-dimensional plane. Earlier, I said that I wanted to decolonize my practice by thinking more critically about painting. But I think that it's also important for us to reclaim painting and to really do with painting what we want to do with it. So this is kind of like a clay painting. There's two others that you'll see in the exhibition. But this one here depicts this sort of star god, trying to reference sainthood and how Catholic religion sort of reappropriated so much of indigenous culture and just local cultures wherever it arrived. I wanted to create my own mythology, create my own deities and gods and spirits, and depicting them through these objects that themselves can be somewhat mythological. And then lastly, through including works like this one in the exhibition, I wanted to highlight the importance of collecting our own work as artists and learning from ourselves. Oftentimes, we're focused on what do we do with these things that we make in the studio? Do we want to sell them? Do we want to store them? Do we want to repurpose them? But it's really important to keep some of your own artwork and to let it have a conversation with artwork that you make in the future. This is a piece that I made in 2023. Sort of, some of you might have noticed it in my Cortavenas exhibition slide that I showed earlier. But it is a very large-scale piece that has lived with me since then. And I found it so relevant to the pieces that I made for this exhibition because it's exactly what I'm trying to challenge. I'm trying to challenge this monochromatic notion, this monochromatic tendency that I had, and at the same time, still embracing the narrative that I was thinking about back then that is still so relevant to my life as a queer artist today. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has some questions. Thank you.
And besides chromophobia?
I've talked with a bunch of students today, and I've been recommending this essay titled "The Painted Protest" by Dean Kissick. which is a critique of identity politics in art today and for the last 10 years. And as someone who has made identity-based work for a long time, it was a really hard read, but I think a really necessary one. And so I would recommend The Painted Protest by Dean Kissick for sure.
All right. Other questions? I did have one. Did you get to work with Nick Cave when you were at in Chicago?
No, I haven't gotten to work with Nick Cave, but he's always around.
Yes. Well, if you have any questions, well, we would like to use a microphone, and well, Jason has a microphone he could throw to you. Very good. Yes. I got it. Yes.
I did have a question regarding how you prepare yourself for solo shows that are themed so specifically. You mentioned the exhibition that you had with these stained glass windows and how it was so everything seemed so purposeful and kind of challenging that, but also honoring the space with your work. How does that logistically work? Like, do you seek out the spaces first? Do you make work intended for a space? Or is it the other way around and you just start with a body of work and try to fit the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every exhibition is different, and every exhibition has different timelines and different restraints. But most of the time, I am reached out to by these exhibition spaces. And once I learn what the exhibition space is, I can react to it. So with the Epiphany show, I was really lucky to have a lot of time to plan my exhibition and react to the space. I got to visit the space as soon as, a few days after I was invited. And with other spaces where it's more of a blank wall, I really just take that as a clean slate where I can really do whatever I want with it. However, as an artist, I have found a great deal of, I guess I found it really practical and really important to have a continuation in the themes and forms that I find important, so that once I have worked in an exhibition, that work can live not just in that exhibition, but in other exhibitions in the future. But typically speaking, I do know what the space looks like and react to the space first. Yeah.
How did, I thought, sorry. How does one aware of their own weaknesses? Like you mentioned one piece where I don't entirely remember which one it was. I apologize. But there was one piece that had different colors, I believe.
That had
Different colors, and mentioned that you were used to drawing one medium and one color scheme. So how do
Yeah.
you is your own artistic weaknesses?
So in the position that you are in as a student right now is a great opportunity to get feedback. Once you leave school and you're working by yourself in your studio, I mean, I graduated my undergrad in 2020, and for the last 5 years, I like barely had people critique my work, and I really missed that. So when you have the opportunity to have your work critiqued, it's really important to listen to the feedback. I know in Chicago we have independent, open to the public critique spaces where people critique work. And then also just inviting folks that you're aligned with to your studio for studio visits is a great way to get feedback. But also I think it's really important to be honest with yourself too. A great strategy that was taught to me by one of my professors during undergraduate and it seems really simple, but she told me an anecdote that I think was really helpful. Whenever I'm painting, I step back from the painting and look at it, identify what I really think is working and what I really don't think it's working, and how I can change that. And she told me about how in the early 20th century, Matisse used to set up his easel at these parks in Paris to paint plein air paintings in public. And people would say that he did more walking than painting because he would paint and then take 10 steps back, look at his painting for a long time, and then walk back to it, change a few things, and walk back. So I think it's really important to not get so stuck in the flow of making something and to really step back and take a good look at it and trust your instinct to really identify what you like and what you don't like.
Hi, so it's about open critique spaces in Chicago. That is awesome. Do you know, or what do you recommend as someone who wants to move to Chicago after college? What do you recommend for a artist who's new to Chicago? What are some other spaces or maybe like organizations that I should know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a long list. I mean, some like really important ones, I would say, like artist-run spaces like Co-Prosperity Sphere. They do great artist projects. The local gallery scene is really vibrant. The gallery where I had my show, Jude Gallery, has turned into Tala Gallery. And they're also a really collaborative artist-run space. So there's a really long list. If you want to email me or message me, I put my Instagram, website, and email. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to sort of provide a list that would take us into 9 p.m. if we stood here.
Hi. The process for making those really large tapestry, like the Walmart blankets that you said. Do you like create a drawing first, or could you tell us more about the process of how you end up with such large tapestry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so those all start out as really small drawings. I really like to make them out of soft pastel because I like how opaque the pastels are. Um, and then I take a photograph of the drawing and make it into a digital image. And I know the ratio that these blankets get woven at. So I make sure to split the image exactly where it needs to be split. And then I get those those fragments woven individually. And then when they get sent back to me, I sew them together, hem the edges to insert poles or other kinds of hanging mechanisms to create this larger, this gigantic piece that I can then fold and ship in a box this big to wherever it needs to go. And there used to be I think it still exists, like a great weaving mill in North Carolina, which is where I've most recently gotten pieces woven. But weaving mills seem to be closing left and right, and so it's becoming a scarce resource. But you can still find places where it's pretty accessible. Yeah, I definitely consider myself to be a really ambitious person, and I would consider that a force. I do have a memory from being in third grade in Colombia, where my class had a drawing competition, and the winner would receive a reward. And I remember sitting down and just drawing because I thought it was fun. I wasn't trying to win. And my drawing got chosen as the winner, and I got the reward, and it felt really validating. And my teacher, this was Catholic school, so she knelt down next to me and she was like, Juan, you have this really great gift from God that has been given to you, and you need to pursue it in your life. And that sort of mentorship and inspiration from that teacher, I definitely feel as a force when I make work.
As a queer, well, that's loud. Get like scared of what the public is gonna, how the public is gonna respond to your works and shows. And do you have any advice for an upcoming queer artist?
Not anymore. I used to, but I've realized, you know, in taking a look at queer art in the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, you look at Tom of Finland, like there's been much more obscene, you know, there's like, it's not something that people are going to sort of push back on you. And if they do, then I think that's a good sign. You want to make people upset. I think you should do what you do unapologetically and not concern yourself with what might people think. Growing up in this weird, like guilt-ridden, shamey Catholic culture, in my family, there was always this like, what are the neighbors gonna think? What are people gonna say? And that's just no way to live your life or live your truth. I think you should just do it. And you know, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. All right, we'll take one last question, and then we can head over to the gallery to check out the show. Please, over here. That's a great question. I think, you know, in this weird political moment that we're experiencing, I think I'm starting to depart from any kind of physical place, and I'm interested in exploring more like psychological spaces. I'm currently working on some paintings that I did that stepping back process, and I was like, oh, like this is not set anywhere. Like it's like this like sort of mental space. But I think my work, I will always pay homage to the nightclub. That's the first place I was validated as a queer person. And then all these other places that I have always painted are just, you know, these archetypes just live within me. And so regardless of where I go, I feel like these places are always going to be a part of the work. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you, Juan. Now, if you could hang out and enjoy both Juan's show and the show in the other gallery spaces. Juan's show is in the Basil Gallery across from the library, and then we have the exhibitions in Berkshire Reese Paul, or exhibition in Berkshire Reese Paul that goes down to Marsh Gallery as well. So make sure to check out all three of those spaces. And thank you so much. Oh, and there's food out. Well, there will be. They're late. There will be food. Yeah.